Someone just said they got the adapter working on the A7 Mark IV and it's working perfectly fine. That's good news. Take number 4, delete the first 2. Welcome back to the channel. Today I am picking up on the 7artisans adapter, which basically gets you a EF mirrorless system, the Canon, directly to the Sony E-mount. And in my case, it's a Sony FE, so it does full frame and it can do APS-C. So if you haven't seen my first video, I reviewed the adapter and was very impressed. I believe I called it the best adapter for Sony mirrorless, and I think it still holds that title, except for there are a few issues, faults, and various problems that I found along the way. So in today's video, I'm looking to share with you some of the issues that I found, as well as answer some of the questions you posed to me and some of the issues you shared in the comments of the previous video. Now, I've always heard about the term, community with videos and channels, but there was the first time when I did that adapter video that I found there was a lot of chatter and people sharing their experiences, whether it's their experience of this adapter on the Sony FX30 or FX3 or the 6600 or various cameras and systems and lenses. So all my comments are basically my experiences with the lens. I bought it myself, I wasn't sent it or given it to review or anything like that. So here we go. So topic number 1 is still the autofocus. I've still found this lens, even after all these months, to be impeccable. Now, I have to also say that I've read some of your comments and some of you have experienced difficulty on some of the newer Sony bodies as well as some of the older bodies. Now, it seems to be that this adapter has definitely worked best in and around all camera bodies released around the autofocus system, around the A7S Mark III. So whatever year that was released, and the cameras probably a little bit before and after, seem to have the best experience with this adapter. Now, there are some firmware updates, and we'll get into that later. I'm still running my adapter on the base firmware that it was shipped with, and I haven't been able to upgrade it, but I'll get into that again later. So I've used this adapter on commercial projects and non-commercial projects, and I've run into a few issues, none of which have been a game stopper. Spoiler alert, I still do recommend this adapter, and I will get into that in the conclusions. So there's a little issue with the button that is on the side of this adapter, where it says C/P, should I say. And with that, you don't know if it's in contrast, which is C, or phase detect, which is the P. So again, it's very tricky to know where you are with that and if you are in contrast and or if you are in phase. Some people have recommended pressing the button once you've attached the lens to put it into PDAF, but I haven't found that to be true when I've used it. So if you do buy it, I would just say have a play and see which gets you the best experience. Now, coming to the issue of the firmware updates, my adapter, I haven't been able to connect it to my PC for some reason. The USB hasn't recognized it. I've followed the instructions, I've gone through the firmware procedures, and it doesn't seem to be working. That may be a Windows issue. I haven't tried it on my Mac yet, but I will endeavor to actually, I think I'm going to leave it where it is, because some of you have commented specifically that you've updated the firmware and it stopped working. For one person, I believe, who had an FX30, and for others it fixed some issues, and yet for others more, it fixed the IS perhaps, but then the AF wasn't working. So there's been a bit of a myriad of issues dependent on camera systems. So I definitely recommend you going to the previous video and going through some of the comments and maybe asking some of the users that have experienced issues, maybe on the camera that you are possibly thinking about buying or have use with this. On the issue of IS, I've tried it with the Tamron 24-70 and the Canon EF 70-200. Now the 24-7 Tamron, it feels like it is working, but then it seems to stop working with the in-body camera IS. So I think if it's on, it's using the lens IS, but then it doesn't work with the camera body system. So I think it's kind of a choice depending on what the scenario is and how it's working. You might want to turn it off. However, on the Canon 70-200, it definitely didn't work. So in terms of usage on the IS, it definitely doesn't seem to work as well, and in some instances fights against the body's IS, so it's a case of either or. And for other cases, it doesn't seem to work at all. And with the updates, it seems to work with the IS on some, and the autofocus has diminished or stopped altogether. So I would probably recommend at least if you have the Sony A7S Mark III like I have, not to bother updating, because at the moment it's still working dreamily and I'm quite happy with it. But get in contact with 7artisans. I've contacted them and they haven't responded, and it's been about 8 months. So yes, I don't think that their customer support or service is particularly good whatsoever. So on that matter of customer service, in terms of emailing, phoning, I haven't had a good experience. They haven't responded at all with any suggestions, fixes, or answers to any questions that I've had, because hearing some of the questions you've proposed to me that I haven't been able to answer, I have taken it to them and not heard back. So if you have emailed them, I would definitely recommend it, because the more pressure you put on them, the more likely they may either have a firmware update and or fix the issue within a firmware update, or just at least acknowledge that and in another update of an adapter fix all these issues. Because again, bar none, I've not seen an adapter work so well with phase detect literally like native on old EF glass or new EF. Well, I know that they've stopped making EF glass, but the more recent EF glass does seem to work exceptionally well. So I hope that they continue to create more of these adapters and make it better for the current generation. Now, one of the biggest issues that I've had, despite the IS debacle, is backlighting. If you've got a stronger backlight, I seem to be getting a little bit more ghosting than I would normally on the lens directly on, for example, my Canon R6. It would be fine, and if I put it on to the Sony, I was noticing ghosting, and it was pretty much the adapter that was causing that. And I don't know whether it's a little bit of the metal showing or something on the inside of the ring. Maybe it's bouncing around a little bit extra light, but it definitely is causing a bit of ghosting, only in circumstances where there is a strong backlight. So if there isn't that, it works fantastically well. So in any commercial scenarios, especially you've got, rim lights or kickers or anything to that effect, it may cause a bit of flaring or ghosting, dependent on the lens itself. For example, I have the 50mm 1.2, which is very good at, not ghosting and flaring. And even that gets a little bit more than it might otherwise do, whereas some lenses that have a lot of flaring, it then amplifies. But without that, strong or harsh light coming in from the sides or top, for example, it works a peach. And in run-and-gun situations, it's fine, because you can, maneuver and move around. I had to buy a matte box. It was a small rig version, which is pretty affordable. It's about 60-ish pounds. It goes onto the front of the camera and allows you to just block any unwanted light, but that solved it in about 90% of the cases. There's also bits on the side you can use if there's any side light. That was a bit of a solve. I appreciate the adapter itself is just under 100 or over, depending on where you're buying it. So it's a little bit of an extra expense if you are having a problem with that particular issue. Now, please do continue to share your experiences, whether it's in the previous video and or this one. So quickly looking through some of the comments on the previous video, I can see already that it's not working on the A6700, but the same person has said it's worked fantastically or works really well on the A6400, and even very old lenses are usable, which is good news for everybody. The A6700, it says it focuses in video mode whilst you're not recording, but once you start recording, it then doesn't grab the focus on the subject on the move. So that sounds a little bit strange and unfortunate. However, that sounds like it is possible to change or fix. So it might be a case of the newer autofocus system that Sony has updated, for example, with the A6700, is causing some further issues. But again, someone with the FX30 recently have said it was working autofocus fine. And maybe that's because it's an APS-C camera and or not full frame. Maybe there's a difference in what's happening with that. They then updated that firmware and then it proceeded to stop working. So at the moment, I think they're trying to roll back that firmware. Some others have had the same issue of not being able to get the computer and adapter working. However, their solve was just trying various cables, and eventually they said that they tried one and it started working. So again, it might be a bit of a PC/cable mystery happening there. A7R2, which says it's working perfectly fine, but they need to overexpose by 2. So I'm not sure if the adapter is causing an exposure issue or whether that is just possibly a log issue. Please take a look through those comments if you have any other questions, because it does seem to be that there are users with various cameras and lenses that are actually quite happy to answer probably more questions than 7artisans themselves. Finally, coming to the conclusion, as I said earlier, I do still recommend this lens. And you might say, why would I recommend this lens if in fact the IS is a bit 50-50 at best on various lenses, and the autofocus on some of the newer Sony cameras isn't great? Now, the reason I say that is probably because I'm using it on the A7S III and I've had a very good experience with the adapter so far, and it is autofocusing very well. I have had the, obviously, as I've talked about, the IS, but I think all things being equal, since there aren't any other adapters that I know that work natively with EF glass in terms of its performance, and I do have a lot of EF glass, it saves me an awful lot of money. Now, the backlight issue was the biggest thing that makes me want to start buying some E mount, so I do think in time I will build that up. But whilst I have glass that I can use, and for example the 50 1.2, which has a very unique and, you know, classic and vintagey almost, you could say, look to it, I still like using that. So I do like character in my lenses. There are issues and things to be aware of, and check if your camera will work, and just be aware that maybe the firmware updates may not be the route. So if it works, maybe test it and see how you get on with it, or ask questions. So please feel free to ask away. I'll do my very best. And in some cases, some of the people on the channel have commented and helped other people with their own experiences. So until the next one, take care. Bye now.